Welcome to Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. So glad you could join us for the next hour. We'll take your phone calls as well as preview one of the Giants' 2024 regular season opponents. Today it will be the Cincinnati Bengals. And if you want to hit us up on Twitter, I'm at GiantsWFAN. He is at Matt Citak. And, of course, you could always go hashtag Giants Chat on Twitter as well. As always, if you don't catch the show live, you can catch the entire archive of all of our Giants Podcast Network programs through the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at giants.com/podcast. Our number, jot it down for right after we get done with our Cincinnati Bengals expert, is 201-939-4513. 201-939-4513. And, you know, I'll tell you something. It's amazing how the calendar is flying by. Matt, this is the last weekend of June, and training camp's going to be here just around the corner.
I know. How excited are you?
How did that happen? It seems like we were just at the Combine.
I mean, as you know, you've been around the team and the building enough years. We don't really have an off season. The season ended. It jumped into the Senior Bowl, getting into the Combine, leading up to free agency, the draft. Then we have OTAs, minicamp. We're in the the little dead period now where there's a couple of weeks, but we're literally going to blink and all of a sudden training camp's going to be here.
Indeed, which is why we are previewing the Giants' 2024 opponents. Today we look at the Cincinnati Bengals. Week 6, October 13th. It is a prime-time game as the Bengals come up here to play the Giants at MetLife Stadium. And to preview the Cincinnati Bengals and what we might see that night is Mo Egger from ESPN 1530 and WLW Radio in Cincinnati. Mo, we appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us.
Anytime. Thanks for having me. What's going on?
Well, I guess the first thing that anybody's going to ask you, if they're from out of town and wants to know about the Bengals, is A, is Joe Burrow going to stay healthy this year? And B, is the line good enough to protect him so that he can stay on his feet?
Two terrific questions. What I could tell you about Joe Burrow is relative to, I think, what a lot of everybody's fears were back in November. Things are in a really good place. He got through the off-season program. He threw on a regular basis. He did take some days off. He has not yet been cleared for contact, but I feel like I feel like things have moved in the right direction since he originally suffered the injury. So I think all signs are pointing toward him being able to start training camp on time. All signs are pointing toward him being able to start the season on time. But it's a great question. Look, Joe has played 4 seasons. 3 of them have ended with him either not finishing the season or limping off the field with an injury in the Super Bowl. And so it's the biggest thing this franchise has to figure out. How do we keep this quarterback upright? How do we protect our most important investment? They took an offensive lineman with the first overall pick. They've spent a lot of money. Well, not the first overall pick, with their first-round pick.
Yeah.
They've spent a lot of money on the offensive line. That unit should be better. People say all the time this offseason, well, it's going to be the best line that Joe has played behind, and there's probably some truth to that. That's not a very high bar to clear, and just because it's the best offensive line he's played behind doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be a good offensive line.
To some degree, I don't mind telling you, Mo, it sounds like you're doing a Giants show because the Giants have had offensive line problems. They think they've got the best line that Daniel Jones has played behind since he's been here. And, of course, he has been injury-plagued throughout his career. The one difference, Joe Burrow's gone to a Super Bowl. For what it's worth.
Yeah. And did so behind a horrific offensive line,
Indeed.
right? And I mean that was the incredible thing about that run. I mean it obviously caught up to him in that game, but every week the coaching staff was having to figure out how to game plan around just a terrible deficiency, that offensive line. And it's not like they haven't gone out of their way to make it better, right? They've signed 5 free agents and spent money on those free agents, high-priced free agents since that Super Bowl. Again, used their first-round draft choice on Amarius Mims this year. We'll see if he has any chance of starting. They've made the line better, but I think you're being reasonable if you wonder, have they made the line even slightly above league average? Now, if the answer is yes, boy, what a wealth of weapons, right? They've got wide receivers all over the roster. They have, I think, an upgraded running back position in terms of explosiveness. They've got a guy who I think is going to be an upgraded tight end from what they had last year. So if the offensive line is merely okay, this offense itself can take off. But if the ceiling is okay, then that means the floor is pretty low, and I think that encapsulates the fear of a lot of Bengals fans.
Yeah, that really does sound familiar with what we, discuss on this show here quite often with our offensive line. But sticking with Joe Burrow, of course, everyone knows that he suffered the calf injury right at the start of training camp last year, and he barely participated in training camp, and that injury sort of lingered into the regular season, and that played a big part in at least Joe Burrow's slow start. But it seems like kind of a slow start has been a common theme around the team for the last couple of years. Why do you think that is? Why have they sort of not been able to get off to what we expect the Bengals to be like right when the season begins?
Well, it starts with Burrow, right? He has never had a, quote, normal offseason, including this one. If you go back his rookie year, COVID, right? So he's learning the offense from his parents' couch in Athens, Ohio. There were no preseason games that year. His first NFL game action was the first game of the season. Then he had a knee injury. That folded over into his second season. He had an appendectomy on the first day of training camp in 2022, his third year, and then the calf issue last year. And this offseason, he's been rehabbing from wrist surgery. So he's never had a normal offseason and a normal training camp. And I think if you look at the last 2 years, that's probably the first thing that you would point to as to why they've gotten off to slow starts. But I think even the coaching staff would admit to you that they have taken a too casual approach the last couple of off seasons. And to a degree, you could understand it 2 years ago, right? The Bengals played in the longest season ever. It was the first year of 17 games, and they made the Super Bowl. So they started the off-season workouts late. It was like an extension of their vacation when you went to watch a training camp practice. And the idea is, Zach Taylor's a Sean McVay disciple, right? The Rams, famously so, don't play anybody in the preseason. I think Zach Taylor took that to another level. and I think what you saw was a team that over the last couple of years was, frankly, ill-prepared to compete. They put such a premium on health, put such a premium on everybody being able to answer the bell, that once the bell rang, they weren't ready to go. And so I think there's two things to consider this year. Number one, I believe they'll put a bigger premium on physical fitness, on playing many of their guys in the preseason, upping the level of physicality to the degree that you can in 2024 during training camp.
Yeah.
Because they can't start 0-2 every year. The other thing is, look at their schedule to start the season. Now, people are going to see they play the Kansas City Chiefs week 2, but that game is sandwiched around a game against the Patriots at home. Bengals are 9.5. A game against the Washington Commanders at home, they're projected to be 10.5-point favorites. Week 4, they go to Carolina. Might be the worst team in the league. And so the league has said to the Bengals, all right, look, you guys have had such an awful time in September the last couple of years. Here's a bunch of patsies. Here's a bunch of teams with either rookie quarterbacks, new head coaches. If they can't get off to a good start this year, boy, that's a big
problem. Like Joe Burrow really needs any help. I mean, come on, Mo. Really? All right, I protest. If that's what the league did, then I protest right now. Honestly, and we laugh, and there's no question there are some similarities in terms of what this team has dealt with compared to the Giants. I got to ask you, though, about some of the offseason rumblings with T. Higgins. I mean, the guy, when he came out of school, I thought he would have been just an absolute superstar. And to be honest, he is a star. He may not be a superstar, but he's a star. And we know he's in the final year of his deal. And there are constantly rumors about him being traded, yet he is still in Cincinnati. Is he going to be disgruntled to the point where he may not be the guy that you've seen? Or is he going to play his butt off looking for another contract?
Based on his track record, I believe the latter. And look, I'll correct you slightly here. I don't think there have ever been trade rumors. Now, T did request a trade. I don't think the Bengals ever came close to trading him. I don't think they ever seriously entertained any offers.
Well, Mo, I think every fan group in every other NFL city kept saying, "Oh, what if we could get T. Higgins? Because he's probably on the block. Let's see." So I think it was trade wins outside Cincinnati. I'm not accusing the Bengals of floating his name out.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Look, the fact is, T. Higgins did request a trade. Look, here's the reality for T. Higgins. He plays on a team with Jamar Chase. And right or wrong, fair or not, they want to pay Jamar Chase. They've already paid Joe Burrow. They like T. Higgins. They like T. Higgins enough to franchise tag him and lose him at the end of this year because they think they can win a Super Bowl with him. In terms of him being disgruntled, I point to last season. The Bengals played a game, Week 17, against the Kansas City Chiefs. They needed to win that game to have any chance of getting to the postseason. T. Higgins got hurt in that game. Now, I think a lot of us would have understood it if T said, you know what, screw it. I'm hitting free agency. I ain't going out there and further risking injury, aggravating an injury, making it worse. And what did he do? He snuck out onto the field with his coaches not even knowing this is a guy who is a gamer. So all I can do is defer to the track record and say that as much as he is probably not very happy about not getting a contract extension, he's never shown any tendency that would make you believe he is going to put himself ahead of the team, or he's going to be a disruptive force in the locker room, or he's not going to give it his full effort. Now, if the season goes sideways, the Bengals stumble out of the gate and they're playing out the string and have no chance of making the postseason in November and December, then we'll see. But I don't think anybody here expects that. And look, at the end of the day, he's going to make $21 million this year. And in a wide receiver market that has exploded dramatically since he first started negotiating with the Bengals, and obviously those negotiations haven't resulted in a contract, the wide receiver market has exploded multiple times since then. If he goes out there and has a killer season and has the sort of year that we know he can, he's going to cash in. It ain't going to be in Cincinnati, but he's going to cash in somewhere.
Yeah, so we obviously know, everyone knows around the league, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, the top two options, in the offense, the top two weapons at least. But a pretty, in my opinion, underrated player who's been there the last 8 years is now gone, Tyler Boyd, who just left and signed with Tennessee. With Boyd now gone, and he has been averaging close to 100 targets over the last 5 years. With Boyd now gone, who do you expect to step up as sort of that number 3 option in the passing game behind Jamar Chase and T. Higgins?
Well, you're right in pointing out Tyler Boyd's importance to the offense. I mean, you talk about somebody who, going back to when A.J. Green and Andy Dalton were still here, fit the role that he was asked to fit perfectly as a number 2 guy, and then once the Bengals got T. Higgins and Jamar Chase as a number 3 guy, and he fit that role perfectly. I think you have to look at what they've done in the draft the last 2 years. They've drafted 3 wide receivers, right? The team that has T. Higgins and Jamar Chase has still drafted 3 wide receivers. The kid who's really exciting to me is Jermaine Burton, who they drafted from Alabama, who averaged 20 yards a reception in 2022. He's a burner, but he can play in the slot. They've loved what they have seen from him so far in minicamp. I think the really interesting piece, though, is Mike Gesicki. The tight end who was in football Siberia last year with the final year of Bill Belichick and the Patriots, but when he was with the Miami Dolphins, had some really, really productive seasons. And if you go back to 2021 and 2022, Joe Burrow took great advantage of the tight end's athletic ability enough that what happened with C.J. Uzomah? He played a season with Joe Burrow and he got paid by the Jets. And then Hayden Hurst comes to town. What happens with Hayden Hurst? He plays a season with Joe Burrow, and then he goes and gets a contract from the Carolina Panthers. It didn't work out with Irv Smith last year. I think Mike Gesicki has a chance to really, because I think he's better than the guys that I just mentioned, I think he really has a chance to kind of be the de facto third wide receiver. They also drafted 2 tight ends, which to me says they're going to use one of those guys as kind of the inline guy, and they're going to take Gesicki and move him around a little bit. And I think statistically, he's due to have a big, big season and effectively be the guy who, from a production standpoint, replaces Tyler Boyd.
All right, I don't know how much more time you have, Mo, so let me just flop at the defense real quick and at least address the fact that I know they need their defensive unit to get better as a whole. Sheldon Rankins comes in. We know him from New York when he was with the Jets at one point. I know Von Bell is now back in Cincinnati. How much better can this defense be, obviously knowing that Hubbard and Hendrickson, the two H guys, are H2O, if you will, or H2D for H2 defense, right? That those two guys are basically the linchpins of what they're doing there.
Yeah, I think the defensive side, the questions on the defensive side are actually the most interesting ones as training camp gets started, because last year they were terrible at two things. Number one, they replaced their two starting safeties. Jesse Bates left via free agency, Von Bell left via free agency, and then what happened? They were dead last in the league in explosive plays allowed, and it wasn't even close, them and whoever was right behind them. They were terrible at not giving up chunk plays. They got beaten over the top 1,000 times. So obviously that points to what they didn't do at safety last year. So what do? They brought Von Bell back. They signed Geno Stone from the Baltimore Ravens. They decided to go with veterans after the youth movement last year failed spectacularly. They have to get better there. I think the cornerback position is really interesting with this team because the guy who was for a while their best cover corner is no longer here, and so it's Cam Taylor-Britt, it's DJ Turner. There's a lot of upside. There's also a lot of inexperience. The other thing with this defense is they were terrible up the middle against the run, and I think one of the more interesting things about this defense is coming into the offseason, we said they've got to get better at defensive tackle. And then in free agency, they lost their best defensive tackle. And so, yes, they replaced DJ Reader with Sheldon Rankins. They did use 2 second-day picks on defensive tackles, but this is a division where you got to go up against Nick Chubb, and you got to go up against Derrick Henry now, Najee Harris, even Lamar Jackson. They've got to be better against the run, and they also need somebody who could provide a pass rush who's not Trey Hendrickson. He was phenomenal last year, right? 17 sacks, but boy, nobody else really consistently got to the quarterback, and so I think there are a lot more questions about that side of the ball than anything happening on offense. I think the good news, though, is this. If the Bengals have a league average defense, right, across the board, chances are that's going to be good enough. And they've got a defensive coordinator, certainly somebody you guys are familiar with, in Lou Anarumo.
Yep.
If there's somebody I trust to get things fixed with better pieces, certainly in the secondary, it's Lou Anarumo.
I'm just going to go back to the offense real quick for one last question about the offense. I think a somewhat big storyline people might have forgotten at this point because it's been almost 5 months now, but Brian Callahan, who's been the offensive coordinator for the last 4 or 5 years, left to be the head coach of the Tennessee Titans, and now Dan Pitcher has taken over. Of course, Pitcher's been there since 2016. He's worked with the quarterbacks a lot, so he's plenty of familiarity with the team. Do you expect the offense to undergo any sort of changes with Pitcher taking over as the offensive coordinator, or was him being promoted from quarterbacks coach to offensive coordinator sort of a way to keep things stable around Joe Burrow in the offense?
I think it's, this is a franchise that values continuity more than anything else. So I think it's look, if Joe Burrow says, I want my quarterbacks coach to be the offensive coordinator, if you were the quarterbacks coach, they would make you the offensive coordinator. So, look, Zach Taylor's the play caller. I certainly have had my criticisms of that. I've often wondered, would it make sense to just sort of change how things function on game day to make things a little bit more efficient, because for all of their talent over the last couple of years, they have gone through some long lulls offensively, but I expect the offense to look mostly the same. I think the one just sort of noticeable difference more than anything else is they feel like they're going to be a little bit more explosive at running back because Joe Mixon moved on and they replaced him with Zach Moss. But, look, at the end of the day, the identity of this offense is let Joe Burrow make reads, let him use his football IQ, spread him out as much as you can, and let him find the open guy. We're not exactly talking about the most sophisticated offensive playbook. I don't think that's going to change all that drastically.
Great stuff, Mo. I know you've got family in tow, so we're going to let you go. I already went over a few minutes from what I promised you, but I appreciate it. Enjoy your summer.
Thank you, Mo.
Anytime, guys. Thank you.
Mo Egger from ESPN 1530 and WLW Radio in Cincinnati, one of the big sports personalities out in that town. We appreciate his time today discussing the Cincinnati Bengals. Again, they'll be coming to play the Giants here at MetLife Stadium, middle of the season. And, I'll be honest with you, Matt. When he started out talking about it, it hadn't really occurred to me as much. But then the second we started talking to him, it's like, well, yeah, offensive line had been in flux for years. Quarterback is constantly getting hurt. Now, I get it. I know. Burrow, Chase, superstar players they've had. They went to a Super Bowl. I get all of that. But the parallel in terms of some of the issues that Bengals team has had or is trying to fix, getting off to slow starts. I mean, this all rings true, doesn't it, to people here in North Jersey?
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, there are definitely some similarities. I mean, Joe Burrow is probably one of the top young quarterbacks. It's still fair to call him young, right? He's on the younger side of the scale, going into year 5, but still one of the top up-and-coming quarterbacks. I mean, every year going into the season, he's a perennial, MVP candidate.
I'm going to say he's one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league, period, regardless of age. Is that okay?
Yes,
okay.
I agree with that 100%.
All right, we're good.
So they've got, I guess, a little more stability in that sense, in that they have their guy that they know will be under center for the next, another decade plus.
Sure.
But, yeah, when it comes to the issues surrounding the Bengals, it does, bring a lot of familiarity with what the Giants have dealt with the last couple of years. Now, I will say the Bengals, similar to the Giants this offseason, have made an effort to really improve the offensive line. As Mo mentioned, they drafted Amarius
with
Mims.
vets, though, basically. Mostly with
they
vets.
drafted Amarius Mims with the 18th pick in the draft in the first round. He might not even be a starter week 1 because of, as you mentioned, the vets that they have on the team. They have Orlando Brown, longtime NFL veteran, and they went out and signed Trent Brown this offseason, who was one of the top offensive tackle free agents throughout the entire league. So between the two Browns that they have at the 2 tackle spots, they've definitely, made a conceded effort to try to improve the protection in front of Joe Burrow. I mean, as Mo mentioned, the offensive line, if they can just give Joe Burrow a couple of seconds to operate, the sky is the limit for the Bengals offense. But that is a big if, especially with how that offensive line has performed in recent years. I mean, Mo mentioned that every single year Joe Burrow has dealt with some sort of injury. That's because he keeps on getting hit. If they were protecting him and making sure that no one touched the quarterback, Joe Burrow wouldn't be suffering from all these injuries. Now, some of them, like the injury last year, I'm pretty sure Joe Burrow, was following through on a throw and his wrist smashed into a player's helmet. That's just like a freak accident. What are you going to do about that?
That happened to Phil Simms one year.
Yeah, but some of the other injuries over the years have been because he was taking hits. And, if you have better protection up front, your quarterback's not going to take as many hits. And with a quarterback as talented as Joe Burrow, all you need to do is give him a couple of seconds. And between Burrow and the playmakers that they have in that offense, the sky is the limit for that unit.
All right, 201-939-4513 is our phone number here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. You got Paul Dottino and Matt Citak. We're going to be here now for another half hour to take your phone calls. Our lines are open at 201-939-4513. Got to take care of a couple of promotional announcements. Up online on Giants.com, you got a chance if you'd like to. If you missed the MSG show last night, A Night of Legends, go to Giants.com. As Matt said yesterday, they have segmented the show into a number of different parts, but you can go there at your leisure. It's on demand. You can watch the whole 1 hour show as it was if you like, or you can watch it in segments. The Night of Legends, which was held at the theater at Madison Square Garden last week. It was presented by Verizon and was an absolute marvelous time for every Giants fan who attended. And those of you who can watch it online, I guarantee you, you will have a great time watching that as well. Don't forget, you can run or walk with Giants legends. The Giants Foundation will host a 5K race and kids run presented by Quest on Saturday, September 7th at 9 a.m. It's at MetLife Stadium, and net proceeds will benefit the Giants Foundation. All participants will receive a commemorative T-shirt after the race. Stay for a post-race festival with appearances by Giants legends and a live DJ. Register now at Giants.com/5K. You spin tunes, don't you? And you're off time? No, you don't do that?
Not quite.
I thought maybe you did.
No.
Okay.
Pearson, maybe.
Pearson could do anything. It wouldn't surprise me. Don't forget the Giants Huddle podcast is available with long-form interviews with Giants and NFL personnel. Find it on your favorite podcast platform or go to Giants.com/podcasts. That is also a really good thing because you'll notice coming up soon, John did a number of interviews with some of the Giants room by room, quarterback room, running back room, wide receiver room. Combine them together.
Wide receivers are going up today.
There you go.
Quarterbacks and running backs have already been posted. Wide receivers are going up today, and then the rest of the position groups over the next couple weeks.
So it's a cool way to kind of get familiar with some of the new players, who you haven't seen before, rookies who came in, veterans who came in. John tries to combine them room by room so you get a flavor for what some of these guys are going to bring to the table. Don't forget, Giants season tickets for 2024 are available now. To learn more about exclusive member benefits, visit Giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. And Giants TV is the free promotional app. It's on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire TV, and the Giants mobile app. Our number, 201-939-4513. What do you got?
Just real quick, one last thing about the Night of Legends, the Night with Legends. So obviously the 1 hour special aired last night. It's now up on Giants.com. I did see just on Twitter a few complaints complaining that it was sort of too condensed, that things got cut out that fans wanted to see. So I just want to say the different segments that Paul was just talking about, those are the full discussions, the full panel discussions that occurred last Thursday night. So, for example, there are 5 segments. One of them, I believe, is the top plays in Giants history segment, which, if you saw photos, this was like Bob Papa sitting with about 20 of the biggest Giants legends in history. That segment alone is about 70 minutes long. And all the other segments, not quite as long, but all together, if you watch all 5 segments, that's going to pretty much be the entire night that occurred last Thursday. So for those of you that were just complaining that the 1 hour special cut some things out, pretty much the entire night is available on Giants.com, the Giants app, and Giants YouTube. You just have to watch the 5 segments separately.
As I said on Twitter the other day, get your popcorn ready.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you sit in front of that screen, you're not going to want to get up.
Nope.
It is great stuff. All right, 201-939-4513 is our phone number, and we're going to get right to the phones. And then I got a question for you, Mr. Matt.
Okay.
We're going to start with Freddie from Australia. Hey, thanks for calling from across the ocean. Hello, how are you?
Hey,
You're on BBKL.
Yeah, good morning. How are you guys? Going well?
Hey,
Very
Freddie.
good to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you. Look, before I start, I'd like to provide some background context to provide you and your listeners how I've formed the views I'd like to present today. I've been sitting on these for a while. Firstly, being a fan of the NFL for over 30 years, the first 25 years I've been an admirer of the game, enjoying the theatrics of the game with a pretty basic understanding of the rules and its language. So I'm pretty nervous about talking to you guys today. Over the last 5 years, thankfully to your podcast and the shows such as NFL Live, I've become a student of the game, trying to absorb as much about the game as I can, as well as other elements of that lead to the players becoming NRL players and NRL coaches. My understanding is still at a basic level compared to your regular visitors, but enjoying the information and discussions provided by you guys and your callers has been really greatly appreciated. So let me begin by simply talking about Saquon Barkley, if I could.
Sure.
In my view, the Giants had to let him go. You can't pay the money he was asking for when you look at the overall production he was delivering during his time at the Giants. The Giants' offensive line has been below par for some time, limiting the opportunities for both the running back and the quarterback. From a cap perspective and the value of the running back position today, it doesn't make sense to have a high-profile athlete on Christian McCaffrey money behind a very dodgy line. The option taken by the Giants at running back makes sense by putting together a cheaper option led by a more durable 78 gamer in Singletary with some young players behind him is a better course of action in uncertain times. Personally, as a coach of the game over here called Rugby League, I didn't like a number of Saquon's playing traits and would have released him myself. Although I hear Saquon is a great person, undoubtedly a talented player, and therefore I hope he gets his Christian McCaffrey moment, but it's just unfortunate it's going to be with the Phillies.
Well, if you're a coach of any type, Freddie, I'm sure that durability is a very high priority for you, as it is with any coach in any sport. And for that reason alone, I would understand some of your sentiments.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, Paul. Just like to talk about Evan Neal, if I could, quickly as well. As you know, the gap between playing college footy and the NFL is massive. Given that Evan Neal played a good portion of his college career at guard, is it ever considered by a coaching staff to start the player like Neal at the guard position to allow him to acclimatise to the pace of the NFL and then move him to a more difficult position which they intended to play him at later in the season? I appreciate the restricted off-season training regulations may limit this as being a real option, but it's a common strategy that we use here in Australia where we play our key playmakers in a position a little bit further away from the main role that they eventually play.
Mm-hmm.
I just sense Evan is in for a better year this year, and I'm hoping that he's got some patient coaches around him. Unfortunately, time is not one of our friends in this level of competition.
No, it's not. He's in a show-me spot right now. Freddie, I will say this. Carmen Brasillo, who has an outstanding track record as an offensive line coach wherever he's been, from college to the pros, is now in charge of getting the most out of Evan Neal. The general manager, Joe Shane, has said time and time again, right now they believe that Evan Neal has what it takes to be a tackle, and that's where he is. He is, at the moment, planned to be their starting right tackle. Now, he had off-season ankle surgery, and so during the spring he was very limited in what he could do. But they believe he'll be healthy enough by training camp, and Brasillo's number one charge is going to be get Evan Neal up to speed. And if he's not going to get up to speed, well, then you got to start thinking about alternatives, and that's the best way I can answer it.
Yeah, and I will say that just because, Freddie, you mentioned, that he played guard at Alabama, he also played tackle. He played 3 different positions in his 3 different seasons there along the offensive line. And the last season was at tackle, in which he had a very, strong, successful season that led him to being the 7th overall pick and led him to being, one of the top 2 offensive linemen in the entire draft class that year. So while he does have some experience at guard, he also has plenty of experience playing at tackle as well. And, as I said, he switched positions every year while at Alabama. And, we speak all the time about how consistency and stability is very important, especially when you're talking about the offensive line. He didn't really get that year to year at college, and he hasn't fully had that during his time here either. With all the various injuries he's been dealing with, and, the off season's not being like a normal, typical off season that you would like. So obviously he's, as Paul mentioned, he's been dealing with an ankle injury that he suffered during the season last year. He's still going through the rehab. He's not fully back from that yet, but the hope is that when the team returns for the start of training camp in about a month, he'll be healthy, he'll be good to go, and they can sort of get him into the normal routine at right tackle and get him, I guess, comfortable both at the spot and with the new teammates that he has playing alongside him, because the Giants went out and signed a couple of guards to play. To basically, they're putting John Runyon at right guard basically to try to help groom and develop Evan Neal, which I think, we'll see if it works, but I think that is a smart strategy to try to get the best out of Evan Neal.
Anything else, Freddie?
Yeah, quickly. Daniel Jones, and thank you for that. That makes sense, especially being groomed and supported on the inside. Look, I'm so happy the Giants didn't draft a quarterback. I like this kid Jones. I hope he brains him this year. From not having the luxury of being in the building or watching him during practice, he seems to have all the attributes for success: size, quick between the ears, has straight line speed, a good arm, accuracy within reason, and tough. Man, this kid's got to be tough after what he's copped. I'm sure I've missed a few skill elements, but seriously, this kid has to have had to overcome so many challenges, including instability in coaching philosophies and messaging. I take my hat off to him and know he'll be working his hardest to improve people. He belongs in this league. He has proven he can win in the playoff game. Now it's only about doing it, I suppose, consistently each year. After you know the NFL doesn't tolerate losing seasons too long, head coaches and key players are not offered the time to develop in the role in any one club. In Australia, we have these key players. Our key players require 50 to 60 games, which is around about 3 seasons before they become comfortable in their roles. Our recent data suggests that players playing quarterback in our game, or the position equivalent to quarterback in our game, are producing their best performances once they're over 30 years of age. Unfortunately, Daniel and Coach Dable don't have that time on their side. So investing in the offside of the ball by adding free agency depth in the off-season in the offensive line and the arrival of Neighbours may help make both of them get past this year at least. So hopefully that's the way. My view is that Daniel Jones will be a top player in the NFL, and it will be hopefully as a Giant. Unfortunately, due to the time already lost through injury, it may not be at the Giants if the O-line doesn't improve. And I'd like to just finish with one question, if I could, about defence and tackling in the game, which I struggle to understand at times. Can you please tell me what's the most important job for defenders in the secondary? Is it to stop the runner in the shortest yardage possible, or is it to dislodge the ball, or is it something completely else?
Oh, that's easy, Freddie. You don't want to give up what's called yak yardage, yards after catch.
Yeah, right.
That is devastating to any defense, because at least if you can make the play on the receiver with the ball and not allow him any extra yardage, now as a defense you live for another down, that maybe you'll stop them with a negative play on the next play. But if you don't get that guy and he gets yak yardage, and if you're in the secondary and he gets behind you and yak yardage winds up going for a 65-yard touchdown, guess what? That could cost you the game. So I would say that's. I mean, I don't know. Matt may not agree. I don't know.
No, for the most part, I do agree, but I also think it sort of depends on the circumstances. Of course, if you're talking about towards the end of the game, you're losing, you need a turnover, then I fully understand. A guy in the secondary just trying to punch the ball out. But even if it's not in that situation, I think it depends on the type of defense you're playing. I mean, if you're a cornerback and you know that there is a safety right behind you, that even if you don't tackle the guy, that the other guy is going to tackle him within, a yard or two, then I have no problem with you trying to punch out the football and force a turnover. But if you're like in press coverage, if it's one-on-one situation, Paul is 100% right. If you're the cornerback and the receiver catches the ball, you need to just tackle him and get him down to the ground immediately. But I don't think that's just the philosophy you should have on every single play. If you know,
that's fair.
If you know that there is one of your teammates is literally a couple of steps behind you and will be able to wrap the guy up within a second, then I have no problem with trying to punch the ball out and force a turnover.
I don't know how many defenses allow you that luxury these days, though.
Well, if it's like a short pass, closer to the line of scrimmage, and you know that there's two safeties behind you, then I'm okay with that.
All right, Freddie, does that answer?
Yeah.
Thank you for the call.
I agree with you. Yeah, no worries, friends. Thanks very much. Talk to you soon.
Well, have a great day, and please call again. He was very well prepared. I got the impression
he knows his stuff.
He had written up a very long script. It seemed like he had given a lot of thought to that phone call. And so, Freddie, please do call again, and don't be intimidated. Please do not. It's quite all right. We love hearing from the fans, especially from those who are curious about a lot of the things that you wanted to ask about.
Yeah, and I got to say, from the way Freddie started the call, sort of saying how he's been a student for the game for a while, and, really the last couple of years he's picked up a lot of knowledge and stuff. I wasn't sure how that call was going to go, especially when I saw Australia up on the call sheet.
I like
here.
what he said, that he was a coach. Yeah, I got the impression that he coaches rugby.
Yeah,
he kind of said that a little bit in his conversation. I always love talking to coaches, because now you can talk about the psyche and the philosophy and the different intangibles that go into the game, which in some instances can be even more interesting than the X's and O's on occasion.
Yeah.
So I love it when coaches call.
Definitely. But I got to say, Freddie, what I was going with that last thought is I'm just saying I'm impressed. You definitely know your stuff about the NFL. So as Paul said, please do not hesitate to call again, because, we love talking to anyone that wants to call in and, actually knows what they're talking about. Which most of our callers obviously do, but once in a while we'll get a call and it makes us roll our eyes a little bit.
Think about the level of his acumen compared to that one guy from Maine who always calls us up. Wow. It was just great to talk to somebody who had a real clue. All right, so I wanted to ask you a question. Okay? And it's open to you fans out there at 201-939-4513. We got about 20 minutes left in the show, so by all means, please give us a ring. There's a CBSSports.com item that went up today about the top 20 wide receivers in the league in 2024. Okay? The Giants have drafted a very high-profile wide receiver named Malik Nabers out of LSU.
Yes.
There is a tremendous anticipation that he will burst onto the scene as a rookie and become an immediate impact player. Now, we've warned people about not to get too carried away right out of the box, but it's certainly possible that he could be an immediate superstar. He's got the skills for it. We just don't know how quickly they're going to show up. So I'm going to ask you this. Most of the people in the top 20 on the CBS Sports list were 1,000-yard receivers. So I'm going to go a little bit higher than that. And I'm going to tell you that last year in the National Football League, there were 12 receivers who caught at least 1,200 yards worth of passes. Jamar Chase was number 12. So I won't ask you, do you think that Nabers goes to the Pro Bowl as a rookie? I'm not going to ask you that. I'm going to ask you this. I won't even ask you if he gets 1,000 yards, because you know what? There were 28 receivers in the NFL. 28 that had 1,000. I'm going to ask you as a rookie, does Malik Nabers catch at least 1,200 yards worth of passes? Yes or no? And I want you folks to dial us up and get in on this. 201-939-4513.
1,200 is a lot. That is a lot of yards.
It is a lot. There are 12 guys who did it, though. 12 guys who did it. And obviously, if he should get that high, he would probably make this list of top 20 in the league. And that itself should lend some context to the question.
Yeah. Okay. So if I have to go with my gut reaction, I would say I do not think he reaches 1,200. And this is not saying that I do not believe in Malik Nabers. I very much do. I mean, after that one OTA practice where he made those two unbelievable catches right in front of us in the end zone, I was completely sold at that moment. And I very much think that Malik Nabers is going to have a very successful NFL career. But 1,200 yards, especially as a rookie, that is a lot. That's asking for a lot. As you mentioned, only 12 players in the NFL did that last year. And if you look at the list, those are 12 of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And I do think Malik Nabers could get into that conversation and, pretty early into his NFL career. But, and I've spoken about this on the show before, I'm very high on Wan'Dale Robinson this year. I think he's going to have a true breakout season. And I think those two players, Nabers and Wan'Dale, are going to be easily the two top targets in the passing game. They're going to get the most targets from Daniel Jones. And I just, because of that, I don't know if Malik Nabers is going to quite reach 1,200. I think if I had to guess, I would put him in the 1,000 to 1,200 yard range. Mm-hmm. I think that is where he will end up, plus maybe 6 to 8 touchdowns. I think realistically speaking, if the Giants can stay healthy at quarterback and the offensive line can, as we talked about yesterday, just have adequate play, I do think that those numbers are definitely attainable. And he could end up getting more than that. I mean, if it's a situation where the offensive line, the 5 presumed starters end up starting most of the year, that probably means good things for the offensive line if all 5 guys play most of the year. And if the offensive line plays well, I think we're going to see a much better version of Daniel Jones than we saw last year. So if in an ideal world, if everything around him is close to perfect, then I do think Malik Nabers can top 1,200 yards. But as we've seen many times year after year, very rarely do you get the ideal perfect situation. Injuries do happen. And so if I had to say right now, I think he's going to go just short of 1,200 yards. I do think he could still end up making a Pro Bowl, depending on how other wide receivers do. But I think Wan'Dale and Malik will get the 2 most targets, but I still think there's going to be some balance in the passing game.
I agree with you.
Darius Slayton and Jalen Hyatt, they're both going to get their fair share of targets.
Yeah, that's why I think he'll get 1,000. I don't think he'll get 1,200.
I think the tight ends, I know you and I disagreed about this a couple weeks ago, but I think the tight ends, while they're not going to play, the biggest role in the passing game, I think they're both going to garner targets as well and get a decent amount of looks between Bellinger, Cager, Theo Johnson. Between those three, I think it's going to be very balanced. I don't really expect one to get significantly more than the other. And even the running backs in the passing game, I think they're going to get a decent amount of looks. So while I do think Neighbors and Wandell are going to get the most targets, because of what I think will be a somewhat more balanced passing attack, I don't know if he's going to reach 1,200 yards.
I'll go for 1,000, but I won't go for 1,200. For reference, folks, if you want to chime in on this question, there have been 8 players in NFL history who have had at least 1,200 receiving yards in their rookie seasons. Nakua, Bill Groman back in 1960 with Houston, and of course that goes back to the AFL. Chase, Jefferson, Bolden, Moss, Beckham, and Billy Houghton, who in 1952 did that with Green Bay. Of course, that goes back to the years of yesteryear. But there have been 8. So the question really becomes, is Malik Neighbors going to become the 9th rookie wide receiver in NFL history to accumulate 1,200 passing yards in one season? I tend to think not. I think 1,000 is much more like it. But in any event, that's the question that I open up as we try to fill up the final half hour of our show. We're going to go to Scott in New Mexico. You're next on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Hello.
Hi, guys.
Hi. Hey, Scott.
First of all, I don't think there's any way he's going to reach 1,200 yards. In fact, I think he's going to be closer to about 800 or 900 yards at the max. And here's the reason. Here's the reasons I think so. All the other 31 other teams in the NFL already know how good he is. I guarantee you there's going to be either double teaming or triple teaming of Malik Neighbors in his rookie year. And it's all also predicated on how well the offensive line can hold up, which will allow Daniel Evans to get the ball to him. So right now those are question marks. So even though I think he's a tremendous athlete, I just don't see him reaching the 1,000-yard level right now. And I know the Giants want to spread the ball out a little bit more.
Yep. So, I concur with you, Scott. I think 1,000 would be a very nice high number for him. I don't see him going much over that. I really don't.
Right. Yeah, I don't even see him getting to that level. But again, he's going to be a major player on the team.
Probably depends on how much yak he gets, to be frank with you. If he breaks some real big ones, a bunch of 50 and 60 and 70 yarders, then he's got a real chance to make that.
I mean, if we're relying on yak for Malik Neighbors, then I think he will
hit
that number.
That's what he does.
He thrives in creating separation, and then once he has the ball in his hands, just taking off and no one being able to catch him. So if that's what we're relying on, then he might easily hit that number.
Yeah, but as I said, I just think all the other teams know how good he is, and so he's not going to get single coverage.
Yeah, that's fair.
The other players I wanted to talk about, I'm a big fan of Nick McLeod, and I was wondering, is he going to get a fair shot at that other corner position? Because I think he deserves it. I know they're talking about, and opposite Deontay Banks as a boundary corner, I just think he hasn't really been given his due, or you can disagree with me if I'm wrong, but I just think he has that potential. I know how good he is on special teams, but can they give him a real chance to earn the position at the other corner spot? I wanted to get your opinion on that. And then secondarily, there's been a lot of praise that Brian Daboll has effused on Lawrence Cager. And one of the questions I have is Lawrence Cager more of a hybrid tight end, and are they going to use him that way, or are they going to do something different with him that they haven't done before? In other words, because I don't know how good his blocking skills are, and since they have Theo Johnson, obviously Daniel Bellinger, but Brian Daboll went out of his way, to really praise him. And so I was wondering how he's going to be used this year. What's your opinion on both of the circumstances I presented to you?
All right, Scott. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
You want to take Cager, and then I'll talk about McLeod?
Sure, why not? Cager was originally a wide receiver in college. Remember, he went to Miami originally, and then as he wound up getting into the NFL, the Jets and the Falcons both had cups of coffee with him, and they made him a tight end. So when he got to the Giants actually viewed him at a dual practice when the Jets came up here to the Meadowlands. and they had a dual practice. Cager had a really good practice. And I wrote his name down in my book. I said, the Jets have like 4 or 5 tight ends on this team. That's somebody who's got to be on my radar if they cut him. And wouldn't you know it, Giants wound up scooping him up, and I was really glad to see it. The problem is now he's been here for 2 years and hasn't really blossomed. Hasn't had a lot of chances, but hasn't really blossomed. He, of course, is, because he's a former receiver, more of a receiving tight end than he is a blocker, or for that matter, an all-around tight end. He's basically more of a stand-up slot tight end. That's what you're going to get out of him, okay? Dable was incredibly high on him the other day when we ended minicamp. He went out of his way to tell everybody he's been the most surprising player we've had throughout the spring. So does that kind of solidify maybe one of the top 3 tight end positions that makes this team? Because they're not going to keep 4. There's no way to keep it 4. 3, maybe, probably, but not 4. Now, where he slots there, is he 2? Is he 3? Whatever. So I've always been a proponent of Cager, but, he's never really been able to blossom and bring out the best in his game. So I would say this, if the spring is any indication, he will make it as one of the 3 and then just take it from there. I mean, a lot's going to depend on how quickly Theo Johnson picks up the system, to be honest with you. I mean, if Theo is a little slow getting the stuff down, then Lawrence is going to be number 2. And then Johnson's going to be 3. We'll see.
Yeah. So just about that real quick, I will say I feel like the coaching staff, what they envisioned the role of Cager playing could be what they were hoping Darren Waller would play last year.
Well, he's a receiving tight end.
That's what he is. He's a receiving tight end. They're similar builds. Waller's a little bit bigger and a little more compact, but Cager's 6'5", 220. As you said, former wide receiver, and I'm not saying he's going to, if he makes the team, he's going to play the same amount of snaps that Darren Waller was playing last year prior to getting hurt. Because, as I said before, I do think the playing time between the tight ends are going to be a lot more balanced this year. But I feel like when he's on the field, that's the sort of role that they envision him playing. And we've seen him flash in small doses that ability to be a very talented, strong pass-catching tight end.
He's athletic.
He's
and
very
has
athletic.
Length.
Yeah. So, again, we'll have to see how the tight end room plays out. I think that's going to be a pretty interesting storyline to follow throughout training camp, which guys stand out from the rest of the group. I mean, of course, we expect Theo Johnson's going to make the team after just being drafted in the 4th round.
I think so.
And I would think Daniel Bellinger, being a 4th-round pick 2 years ago, has a very good chance of making the team as well. Outside of that, the other spots are kind of up for grabs. And so we'll have to see how that plays out. Now, in terms of McLeod, I think he does have a chance to win that second outside corner spot. And I know during OTAs, Brian Dable came out and said that, at least as of right now, Cordell Flott has the second outside corner spot. And I think to start training camp, that will be the case, because that's what we saw all throughout these spring practices. But it was interesting that the Giants didn't really, other than bringing McLeod back and then a couple of, end of the roster signings like David Long and Trey Herndon, they didn't really add any veteran cornerbacks this offseason. Of course, they drafted Drew Phillips as well, but he's a slot corner. They didn't go out and sign any, big name outside cornerbacks, which a lot of people thought they would. Now, of course, there's still another month. They still could add someone like that, but
and those guys can be costly too.
They can be costly. Like Stephen Gilmore, who's still a free agent, he's going to sign for more than what I would expect the Giants are willing to give any free agent at this point of the offseason. But Nick McLeod, he did primarily play on the outside last year when he got some playing time. He played in all 17 games. He started 3, and he got, let me see the exact number, 244 snaps at outside corner, according to Pro Football Focus. And again, I don't want to start a Pro Football Focus conversation with you, Paul, but if you look at some of the analytics, not the PFF grade, but the actual analytics of McLeod's season last year, he played well. He played well when they called upon him to line up outside. He gave up 15 receptions for 152 yards and 1 touchdown all season.
See, this is good because they actually got something right.
His coverage grade.
McLeod's a good player.
His coverage grade, which I know we take it with a grain of salt, but he got an 80.7 coverage grade, which is a strong number.
Now you had to push it.
Okay, we'll stop with that. But point being,
just believe your eyes. Believe what you see, like Antrell Roll used to say.
Yes.
McLeod can play in this league.
Since he got here, the last 2 seasons, he hasn't played a ton, but when he has been on the field, he has played well. Mm-hmm. And the first season, 2022, the Giants picked him up off waivers right at the end of training camp. So there was no offseason to really learn the playbook and get accustomed to the defense, learn how to play with his teammates. He was just thrown right in there. Now, they brought him back this year, obviously. I believe he got one of the tenders. They tendered him.
Yep.
And he's returning. And so he has had an offseason now to, learn Shane Bowen's defense along with the rest of the defense and, kind of get more accustomed to trading and playing with his teammates, especially the guys in the secondary. I think during training camp, if he excels and Cordell Flott struggles, I think there's a chance that week 1 could be the second outside corner alongside Deonte Banks. Again, he's going to have a strong training camp, and Cordell Flott would have to sort of stumble, which in an ideal world, both guys play great and stand out and give us a whole lot of confidence that we have depth in the cornerback room. But yeah, just in terms of the caller's question, I do think he's going to have at least a chance to show that he can earn that second outside corner spot.
McLeod played over 50% of the defensive snaps 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And allowed less than 55% completions on targeted throws to him. There's no question that he is a competent backup at the very least at corner in this league. Is he a day in and day out 17-game starter? Sometimes guys are just better utilized as backups. Just like in baseball. I know you played ball. Sometimes guys are better as platoon players than they are playing the full season. I don't know exactly where Nick McLeod lies, but I've always gotten the impression that the Giants believe he's better utilized as a backup corner as opposed to being a starter. I know he's got tools to play, and I have never doubted it. I'm just trying to come up with some rationale as to why he's never really been given a chance to win the starting job, because he hasn't been.
No.
To this point, it hasn't happened.
You're 100% right.
And I can't give you a better reason why, except that they may think he's just better off as a reserve.
Well, I think this, training camp especially, we're going to find out if that's how they feel. Because if the roster stands as it currently does, if there's no, veteran free agents signed right before the start of training camp, then I think it's basically the two biggest, he is the biggest potential challenger to Cordell Flott for that second outside corner spot.
And remember, he played at Notre Dame. I mean, he played at a big-time program, and he was there for 5 years. All right, actually, he was there at North Carolina and then transferred to Notre Dame for his final season of college eligibility. And so he played at big-time programs, and he's mature, and he has the physical tools and the size and the length. There's a lot to like there. When the Giants got him from Buffalo, I strictly said, okay, I know about this guy in specials. He's a terrific gunner. They really need one of those. That's great. That's why they got him. And then when he started to have to play some defense, I'm like, well, wait a minute. He can play too. Yeah. He can play corner. So I just think that to this point, at least the old coaching staff thought he was better off as a reserve. We'll see what Shane Bowen says.
Yeah.
Right? We'll see what he says. But McLeod is a heady player, and he's certainly not afraid to get in the mix and hit people. He's not shy about making a tackle.
Definitely not. And I do think one thing that will help him is the fact that he's just proven since he's gotten here the last 2 years to be very versatile.
Well, yeah.
They've lined him up outside corner, slot corner, at safety, and he's played pretty well no matter where they put him out on the field.
I want to make sure I got this right now. In the media sessions that the media was allowed to during the spring, again, that's all we're allowed to talk about in terms of player deployment, did he not spend one of those media sessions as the slot?
I don't know if it was a full
At least part
session.
At least part of it, though.
I think he lined up at times in the slot.
I believe he did.
And then he's lined up. I mean, he lined up all over the field.
Well, we
during spring practice.
We even saw him practice some last year as a safety. So as you said, that's not a surprise. He does have flexibility, again, because of his size.
Yeah, I think even if he doesn't potentially, win that second outside corner spot, I think that there is a good chance that he will get a good amount of playing time this year, kind of all over the secondary. One of those like defensive weapons, sort of like when the Eagles just drafted Cooper DeJean, and everyone was like, oh, they're going to use him just like a defensive back, like a pure meaning of defensive back, and just have him line up all over the secondary. I think Nick McCloud could end up playing that role for the Giants.
In short, that's one of the reasons why I think the Giants are actually going to be okay at corner, because they've got bodies. They've got guys who they can go to and say, fight for the job. Yeah. Okay? One of you guys, go win it. It's not a black hole. You've got Banks. You've got, obviously, he's going to be on one side. But on the other side, you got Flott. You got Trey Hawkins is going to fight for the job. You know that McCloud is going to fight for a job. You hope that Long has something left, the veteran that they signed during the offseason. You want to believe that Aaron Robinson can come back and fight for a job. And you certainly got McCloud, who is not at all afraid to go out there and try to fight for a job. So you may have as many as 5 guys who are going to stick their nose into that CB2 spot and say, Coach, look at me. That's why I think they're going to be okay. They got candidates.
Yeah. They went out and got a couple of guys, especially that just have NFL experience. All between David Long and Trey Herndon.
I think we started just a tad short, so we're going to go. I was going to say we had one more call on the line. We were going to try to sneak him in, but I think he's gone.
You did it. It was Charlie, and
he's
hung
gone.
Up.
We were going to try to sneak him in, but he has hung up. So that'll do it for this week's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. Folks, we are on vacation the next couple of weeks. Next week, there will be no show. The office is closed. The following week, we will have taped versions of Big Blue Kickoff Live, as I did go over 5 of the Giants' 2024 regular season opponents. We will give you those summer training camp previews each of those days the following week, but there will be no live show, so there will be no live phone calls. But again, we will have a preview of teams the Giants are going to play this upcoming season.
Yes, and if you're starved for Giants content next week, come to Giants.com or the Giants app. There will still be new content every single day as we get you ready for training camp. As we said, it's only a couple weeks away.
All right. Well, that'll do it for today's show. For Matt Citak, I'm Paul Dottino. You've been listening to Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Happy 4th of July, everybody. Stay safe and enjoy. We'll see you in about 3 weeks.